First up, we have Representative Ryer with House File 747. And I'll move that House File 747 will be laid over for possible inclusion. And with that, welcome to committee, Representative Ryer. Would you like to tell us about your bill? Oh, and I see we have an A5. So Representative Ryer has an author's amendment that is coded A5. I'll move the A5 to get the bill in the shape the author would like. Any discussion on the A5? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the A5 say aye.
Aye.
And opposed say nay.
No.
Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Ryer, now that the bill is in the shape that you would like it to be, will you please tell us about the amended bill, please?
Thank you, Chair Eagan. Thank you, committee members. It's a pleasure to be here. House File 747 is a bill that establishes a grant program to fund the installation of solar panels on local public buildings. This grant program will be funded by the Renewable Development Account, or RDA, and the General Fund, and the program will be administered by the Department of Commerce. An appropriation amount is still being determined. As we see the effects of the climate crisis become more severe, it's essential that we use all the tools at our disposal to mitigate the effects. At the same time, with declines in the cost of solar energy, use has expanded from our largest utilities all the way down to individual homeowners. Minnesota stands to benefit from increasing our use of solar, and this program puts the tools in the hands of local government units that may not otherwise be able to afford it. It helps them stabilize energy costs while addressing climate change. In this program, towns, cities, counties, and tribal governments can apply for grants to install solar panels on local buildings, for example, a library, community center, or water treatment plant. It's a statewide program that can benefit rural, suburban, and urban communities alike. Solar on public buildings brings tangible benefits. For example, we lived in an apartment building with a solar panel installation. Solar provided power to all our common spaces, with some left over. We can enjoy these benefits on our public buildings too. Our communities are looking ahead to a sustainable future. In Eagan, redevelopment of the police station included a roof built to accommodate solar in the future. Our communities are ready for this. Let's take this opportunity to invest in their energy future. I'd like to turn it over now to our testifiers to talk more about the program and its benefits. Thank you, Chair Eagan.
Welcome, Logan O'Grady, Executive Director of MnSEIA. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Members, for the record, my name is Logan O'Grady. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association. Been here a couple of times now, but just a reminder, MnSEIA is a 501c6 trade organization. We are a force of 140 member companies moving Minnesota solar and energy storage forward. I wanted to thank Representative Ryer for, again, authoring this bill. It's been around for a few years now, and it's a really innovative bill. It's a public-private partnership, in a sense, that puts Minnesota at a competitive advantage over other states in our region. As I mentioned in one of the first hearings that I attended this year, some of the legislation that the legislature is going to be considering this year really serve in our members' minds as business signals, showing that Minnesota is a great place to come, open a company, grow your company, hire Minnesotans to do your work. And that's similar to this bill. This bill is very similar to the Solar on Schools program, which has been exceedingly popular throughout the state of Minnesota because it lowers utility bills for local governments and therefore saves taxpayers money. Simultaneously, we're creating great jobs here in Minnesota and opportunities for Minnesotans. As you consider this bill, I'd also just mention that as we look at other programs like this one and other ones throughout the rest of the legislative session, MnSEIA is very concerned about transmission issues and making sure that as we bring more solar onto the system, we can actually deliver that to Minnesotans. And so I look forward to continuing our discussion with that and the utilities as well. With that, I have some members here. Otherwise, I can stick around for questions.
Quick question, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering why this bill is not going to Commerce and it's not going to State and Local Gov.
I think we've asked chairs if they're interested in seeing it and hearing the bill, and they haven't indicated that they are, it will be here. If they request to see it, we're happy to share the bill with them and have them give it a hearing. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Madam Chair, we can't be just skipping committees. We've been doing this all session. It's been a month in, and we've been skipping committees left and right. And this is a really important thing. The Department of Commerce is literally in the bill as the arbiter of what's going to happen. There are huge holes in this bill, which I will get to in a minute. And one would think that if you're going to do something for local government, you would include the Committee of Local Government. So it's a little bit ridiculous, this expediency that we seem to be under, this pressure we seem to be under, some would call it the freight train that's coming right at us, is just, I don't understand what we're doing here. I've been here 11 years. I don't know what we're doing. I don't understand why we're skipping committees. It seems to be in every committee, they're just skipping committees and going straight to the floor or whatever, but this is just not how things are done. I know you haven't been here real long, but you talk to members that have been here over 30 years, and this is just not how things are done. The speed and the skipping committees is just too much. I actually do have some questions about the bill because even though it's been here for a few years, I don't think this bill is ready by any stretch of the imagination, and I have some serious questions to ask. One of which is, while there's a reporting requirement to the legislature, it's only like how much money went out and how many kilowatts were put up. It says nothing about what happened after that, like how much energy was actually produced and what kind of impediments did people run into. It's such a scant report to the legislature. That's one question. Is that something that the author would be willing to add into this bill since it is being laid over and skipping to other committees?
Representative Breyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative O'Neill. First of all, I just want to comment that the bill path this year is identical to last year. So from my point of view, it is how we've been managing this bill. To the reporting requirements, I am careful about adding burden to local governments in terms of reporting. So I would want to think carefully about that, especially some of the smaller units of government that we hope to help that have very small people who are permanent staff in their city offices. So that would be something to talk about and make sure that we aren't creating problems for the very people we're seeking to assist.
And before turning to another question, I just want to remind the committee that the Department of Commerce is under our jurisdiction here in the Energy Committee. So Representative O'Neill.
Well, that is true. It should probably go to the committee that deals specifically with commerce. And if commerce wants to come down and talk, I don't know, that's fine too.
We have the chair of the Commerce Committee here. I think he can probably.
I feel like I was summoned.
Yeah, he came right.
I was
on
really
time.
meaning the Department of Commerce, but if you want to speak to it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if Representative O'Neill, if you were saying that the bill needed to go to the Commerce Committee. You know, we have the energy accounts are within this committee's jurisdiction. We really don't have the energy division under the purview in the Commerce Committee. I just was looking at the bill, and if I had been asked as a chair whether I would see this bill at any point, I would say no, because it's an energy division bill. I don't really know what would even fall under my committee's jurisdiction that's in the bill. I think this is wholly within Chair Akin's jurisdiction because the energy division accounts are all with Chair Akin.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's the Department of Commerce here. They don't have a fiscal note, and since it's not going to commerce as a whole.
Looks like John Kelly's here. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair and members, for the record, I'm John Kelly. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Minnesota Department of Commerce. To your question, Representative O'Neill, we have completed a fiscal note on our end on this bill. We have sent it on to it's, I believe, being sent to the Legislative Budget Office today. I will note a couple of things as a preview. Because there are not dollar amounts in this bill currently, we based our assumptions in the fiscal note on the Solar for Schools in Greater Minnesota program that we currently run. And we noted that once there are appropriations we would need to, and we would need to revise the fiscal note. But we have worked on this fiscal note. I approved it this morning, and it's on its way to the LBO. So that will be coming.
And when we get it, we'll be sure to share the link to that. Representative O'Neill.
Well, typically, we wait for the fiscal note before we hear the bill, but okay, we're just going to, this freight train's going to keep going. So we're not willing to put any sort of feedback as far as, okay, we know how much we're putting up, we know what the kilowatts are going to be, but we don't know how much is actually being generated because that's too burdensome upon local government, even though we're not going to the local government committee. Okay. Do you have any idea how much you're going to be taking from the general fund and how much you're going to be taking from the RDA?
Representative Breyer.
Madam Chair, Representative, it will be split according to the distribution of coverage for each in the state, and it will, so that it's based on that allocation. And just for the record, I believe I said that I would have conversations about reporting, making sure that it worked for people, not that I would not consider conversations.
Representative O'Neill, did you have more questions, or should we finish with our testifiers?
I have one more question before we get to the rest of testifiers.
Great. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm reading the bill, I have a concern about the contract. And my concern is the decommissioning and recycling of the solar panels and whose responsibility that is. If it's the developer that is in the contract as responsible and the developer goes bankrupt, which we have seen, at least out in my area, rather often.
Representative Breyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative. That's an area that I'd be happy to discuss further because I think we should have a process in place where that responsibility would devolve to the building that owns it.
And Representative O'Neill, is that,
Madam
you said
Chair,
your last?
Madam Chair, did the author say that it would fall on the building owner?
No, I think she said that she would be willing to talk with you more about it.
Yes.
Representative Breyer, would you like to repeat
Thank
what you
you.
had said?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, that would be an option. We should look at possibilities and have a plan. I think that's a good question and one that warrants further conversation since it's being laid over.
Representative O'Neill, are you?
Yeah, just really quickly, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, that is probably half of the bill because it's one thing to put it up and generate electricity. It's a whole other thing to decommission it and maintain it. Maintenance is also not specified if that developer who is allowed to do the application actually goes bankrupt. And so these small little communities with 2 or 3 staff could actually be really underwater and really in trouble if something goes wrong, which it often does. So I hope that you take that into, this really needs to go to state and local government because they're the experts in that area. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And with that, we'll maybe continue on with testifiers. Next, we have Braden Solom with Ideal Energy. Welcome to committee. Enter your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Chair Eagan, members of the committee, my name is Braden Solom. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Ideal Energies. We are a commercial solar developer that focuses heavily on developing projects for Minnesota's public sector. Specifically, we work with many cities, counties, school districts, government entities to develop on-site rooftop solar projects on public buildings that directly offset utility expense, so what we call behind-the-meter solar. And thank you for allowing me time to speak in support of House File 747. The Solar on Public Buildings program and appropriation will help institutions that would otherwise be unable or unwilling to participate in on-site solar to date. It will help them provide a greater financial return, which will ultimately save taxpayer dollars as these institutions pay less for energy. I specifically want to point out that funding for public entities outside of Xcel Energy territory is extremely important, as there has historically been no option for these institutions to participate in on-site solar energy. This money will create that opportunity, and we anticipate there will be ample demand for participation. To give some perspective on this potential demand, We can look to the Solar for Schools program for utilities located outside of Xcel Energy territory, which completed its first round in 2022. There was such significant interest in this program that the Department of Commerce had to limit applications to 2 projects per district in some cases. Similar to many public entities located outside of Xcel territory, there was little to no opportunity to install commercial-sized solar arrays due to a lack of incentive programs to make these projects financially feasible under typical industry standard financing arrangements. For many, the Solar for Schools program was the first time they have been able to explore on-site solar for their buildings. And from our experience working with districts so far, we've found that many have been waiting for an opportunity like this and excited for the opportunity to participate. It's safe to assume this demand will apply towards all other public entities, and we anticipate there is more than enough demand for this potential program to utilize all potential funding for the program. As you can see, the Solar on Public Buildings program is primed for success. It will offer many cities, counties, and government entities their first opportunity to install solar, and we anticipate they are excited and ready to participate. The result of this program will be a significant reduction in the cost of energy to participating local governments for years to come, while taking an important step towards reducing their community's greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solom. Next on the list, we have Mike Supina, Eagan City Council member. Welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Acom and members. My name is Mike Supina. I'm a registered architect and LEED accredited professional. I'm also a council member with the City of Eagan, although I'm testifying in favor of House File 747 today as a private citizen and not representing the official position of the City of Eagan. In recent years, nearly every impediment to widespread conversion to solar energy has been overcome. Solar panels are now cost competitive with fossil fuel energy generation. The impacts of climate change caused by fossil fuel combustion is now undeniable. As more private homes install solar panels, public acceptance has become the norm. The only remaining impediment is the upfront investment for initial installation. That's why House File 747 is such an important bill. Solar energy generation should be standard on any new public building in Minnesota that has favorable solar exposure. But the long-term benefits of solar power are often superseded by more immediate concerns once local governments start making tough decisions about budget priorities. It doesn't need to be that way. Governments own their facilities long enough to realize a return on investment. I would love to see Eagan install solar panels on our public buildings, but I would love even more to see smaller cities and outstate Minnesota have that opportunity, which without state assistance could be a prohibitively costly addition to their small budgets. If state government truly wants to reduce our carbon footprint, it needs to lead by example. We've developed the technology to harness solar energy cleanly and cheaply. All we need now is the political will to make the investment. We can do this. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Isabel Ricker with Fresh Energy, Clean Electricity Director. Welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Isabel Ricker. I'm the director of the Clean Electricity Program at Fresh Energy. Many of you are familiar with Fresh Energy, but we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit clean energy advocacy organization here in Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House File 747 today. We appreciate the opportunity to share our support for this effort to advance the installation of solar energy on public buildings across the state. As other testifiers have mentioned, over the past decade, solar energy has become one of the cheapest ways, and in many cases, the cheapest way to produce electricity in Minnesota. Minnesota utilities and corporations are investing heavily in solar energy and seeing the financial benefits of shifting to this clean energy resource. This bill will support local and tribal governments in developing solar projects themselves as well, whether that's to reduce their electricity bills or to advance local climate action plans. Solar is an effective tool for public entities looking for long-term energy savings and utility bill stability. Solar provides electricity with zero fuel cost and nearly zero maintenance costs for at least 20 years. This bill ensures that public entities that are considering this cost-effective This bill ensures that public buildings are also considering cost-effective energy conservation measures, which will help maximize their energy savings. This proposal builds on the success of other programs like Solar for Schools to ensure that all types of public facilities, not exclusively schools, can access benefits of solar while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting clean energy jobs here in Minnesota. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ricker. I would not.
One question.
Oh,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just because
Garofalo.
we've heard 3 times, I just have one question for the testifier or any of the previous testifiers. We've had 3 testifiers say that solar is is one of the cheapest or the cheapest form of electricity generation. It just begs the obvious question that if it's so cheap, why do we have to subsidize it? If anyone has that response.
Ms. Ricker?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative. I think this gets to the point made by the council member from Eagan, Mr. Supina, about the upfront cost of the the solar system versus the long-term bill savings and the relatively tight budgets that many local governments and public entities have. So while it is the cheapest way to produce electricity, it does have an upfront capital cost and then zero fuel cost. So when you level, I'm sorry to use jargon, on a levelized basis, it is by far the cheapest in many, many cases. However, it does involve that upfront capital cost, which is a budget challenge for many.
Madam Chair, and to the testifiers, there's a
Representative Garofalo.
There's a 30% tax credit at the federal level. It's already subsidizing it and reducing the cost by 30%.
Ms. Ricker?
Madam Chair, Representative, I agree, and the new federal bill does allow public entities to take that tax credit for the first time. However, we know that our state needs to be investing in clean energy, and we need to be accelerating the transition to clean electricity as quickly as possible, and investing in clean energy for public buildings is, I would say, one of the most financially responsible ways to make those clean energy investments because of the savings it will result for taxpayers.
My final
Representative
question-
Stevenson was going to I think he was making a comment on this point.
Well, I just wanted to ask Representative Garofalo if he was aware, if he could tell me, do fossil fuels have any subsidies from state or federal government? I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Representative Garofalo.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Representative Stevenson, there are energy producers, they all receive subsidies, deductions, and credits for investments, but there's nothing that specifically says, well, I guess carbon capture, you could classify that as a new subsidy that's been created recently, but generally on the investment side, there's not preferences or set-asides. They all get deductions for investments and credits. And it's not a question for this testifier, but maybe for future testifiers would just be, so on solar installations right now, we got a 30% federal tax credit on the front side. We have incentives coming along in the form of this bill and others. Just how much of the installation cost needs to be subsidized in order for it to be cost effective and to get the communities that are wanted involved in there? What percentage of that, what does it need to be? This testifier certainly doesn't have to shoulder the response.
That's a good question, and we can certainly continue to look into the question that you have. So we will.
Well, Madam Chair, the question wasn't for you. It was the statement that I was making that this testifier doesn't have to answer, but maybe as future testifiers come forward, just let us know of that total cost, not the price, but the cost. Just let us know how much percentage of it needs to be subsidized or incentivized. We all know that you're getting 30% right now in the form of a subsidy from the tax credit, but how much more it needs to be cost effective. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Ms. Ricker, do you have a response to that at all?
I'd be happy to, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative. The bill is structured such that the Department of Commerce can determine the appropriate grant amount for each project, which I think can help address your concern. And one of the other important components of this bill, which I don't believe has been addressed yet today, is that It authorizes the department to provide technical assistance. In fact, I think it requires the department to provide technical assistance to public entities seeking to install solar. And that information gap is often a very challenging barrier for public entities to overcome, especially those with small staff and potentially limited expertise in clean energy technology, which is, still relatively new to many. So I think that's another important component of the way this program is structured.
Thank you, Ms. Ricker. And Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a question kind of along Representative Garofalo's lines of questions. So is it my understanding that, let's say, the Department of Commerce would build, essentially release these funds to government entity X, and it's for $1 million to build a project? Who would actually receive the tax credits? Would the tax credits be used as part of the purchase price? So let's say, if the total cost is $1 million, will the entity get the $1 million, or will they get 70% because of the tax credits of the cost? How does that work? Or will the state of Minnesota pay for the whole million, and then the tax credits just get to be on top of that? Or is there matching dollars that are required from the local unit of government? And then those cost savings, a couple of the testifiers said it's going to save taxpayers money. Will the funds that are saved that aren't going to utility bills be required to be returned to the taxpayers? Or how does that work?
Representative Ryer, would you like to respond to that?
Madam Chair, Representative, so there are a few things in there. First of all, if you look at the average cost of a 40 kilowatt solar installation on a flat roof, it's about $135,000, and that's the max they can have. So we won't be looking at $1 million grants, just to level set the scope of this project. The other part is to say tax credits come and go. They may or may not be there. And so I wouldn't want to make a commitment to what the financing would be. Again, it goes back to the commissioner to say, how will this be implemented specifically around those matters? I would expect it to be fair to the community. I would expect it to be fair to the state of Minnesota. And I would also expect the local government unit to then be able to use the savings to fund the operations and the amenities and all of the things in their community that they would otherwise be investing their scarce and valuable resources on, their taxpayer dollars.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it won't actually save, there's no guarantee that we'll save taxpayers' money in this bill.
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, we are not putting restrictions on what local governments do. They know their needs better than we do. We know, we trust them to make decisions about how to use that resource. If natural gas went down, if other types of energy went down, we wouldn't expect them to change their budget and give it back to the taxpayers. This is similar in my mind. We expect them to use their funds as best they can.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think with that, we'll go on to our last testifier, Aurora Vautrin with the 100% campaign. Welcome to committee. Please, welcome back to committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Aurora Vautrin, and I am the Legislative and Political Director for the Minnesota 100% campaign. Thank you, Chair Acomb and members of the committee and staff for the opportunity to testify today. And thank you to Representative Ryer for authoring this bill that we are thrilled to be in support of. The 100% campaign is a cross-sector, statewide, multiracial, intersectional campaign to build an equitable, clean energy future for everyone in Minnesota. Representative Liz Ryer's House File 747 is a bill to establish a solar grant program for public buildings. The bill would create a fund program at the Minnesota Department of Commerce to support the development of solar generation systems that would be installed on public buildings owned by local governments. The program establishes a robust process for evaluating local governments' energy conservation needs, requesting proposals from governments, utilities, or developers, providing technical assistance, and then administrating the grants. This bill will meet a real need among Minnesota's local governments. This year, 16 Minnesota cities have come together to declare climate emergencies. But acknowledging our shared challenge is just a start. Many communities have already started to take action at a local level. As of March 2022, 13 cities and 1 county have created climate action plans in response to the public demand for locally grounded, effective, and equitable clean energy and climate solutions. Making it easier for local governments to finance solar is a practical way our state government can help cities implement their plans. Installing solar on public buildings will meet the goals of virtually all of these plans by lowering local governments' electricity bills, cutting their greenhouse gas emissions, and generating local family supporting jobs. We want all communities to benefit from the clean energy transition, regardless of how big or small. And Representative Ryer's bill helps do that. It helps ensure all communities can enjoy the benefits of less pollution and lower energy costs over time, even if they can't quite afford the upfront costs of solar. Please support House File 474. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vautrin. With that, is there anyone else that wants to testify to this bill? Seeing none, we'll see, any discussion or questions from members? Representative Swazinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ryer, why are you only allowing this to be on buildings? Why wouldn't you allow these to be self-standing? It's my understanding that rooftop solar is probably one of the most expensive way to actually install solar. Why wouldn't you allow it to be, on a post in the playground or something like that? Does it have to be on the building?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, it can also be adjacent to the building.
Representative Swazinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then just a follow-up. So, obviously there's the other bills that are connected to this committee was passed off. The requirement to, if you do emit CO2, that you have to buy RECs in the bill that was passed a couple of weeks ago. Who will own the RECs? Will the state of Minnesota own the RECs because we're the ones that actually paying for it that are created? Will the developer who receives the state money in order to make it affordable keep the RECs, or will the local unit of government? How will that? Can we request that? Who would own that?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, ownership goes to the grant recipient. It goes to the local unit of government.
Representative Swazinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then nothing was answered. How do the cities have to match, or the local unit government have to put up any money of their own to build these projects?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, as the testifier said, it will be determined by, on a case-by-case basis. They can use judgment to say what are the means of the community. However, as a bedrock principle of it, I think that this should be a zero barrier entry into solar because the stakes are so high. We need to continue our path to addressing emissions in Minnesota and moving toward clean energy. There are small towns who would not be able to touch this if they had to make a match. And it's very important to me, it's a priority to me, that we make it accessible and available to communities that want it.
Representative Swazinski, did you have any follow-up?
I'm good.
Should we go on to the next?
Go on.
Representative Eagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question, we listened to those testifiers, talked a lot about how a bill like this is going to be important because of the cost. And I've talked about it, I think, in every committee today I'm in. So for those that share committees with me, I'm going to talk about it here today, too. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that Beijing is considering moving a proposal that would ban exports of solar panel wafers and solar ingots to the United States. They make up 97% of the world's total production. If this goes into effect, the U.S. has no solar manufacturing that we would be able to build out these solar panels. So my question to you is, how does this bill going to actually even be able to work if something like that was into effect? And I think this is outlining the big problem here. How can we be moving legislation like this without any domestic supply chain or any domestic manufacturing of these products?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative Igo, you know, I come from the business world, so to me, that just has lights going off in my head about the business opportunity that I expect to continue to grow. That said, there's no requirement here. This fund is available to local units of government to use and to request as they see fit. If it's not going to happen, the funds won't be expended. I don't see, that would be disappointing, but it's not a structural problem.
Representative Igo?
The point I was trying to raise there with my question is, if we do not have a secure supply chain for the solar panels, why are we doing a one-time appropriation into this fund to create all of this if the solar panels will not be there? And then I'll also raise the debate at the same time, why are we using taxpayer dollars to invest in the way that these panels are produced in horrible ways to bring it to and put them on our public buildings? I mean, these are serious concerns that I have and my constituents have. So, I mean, these are, I would prefer not of a runaround answer like that, if you don't mind. Like, if we cannot get these solar panels here in the United States, why are we doing a one-time appropriation?
I don't think that it's a guarantee that we can't get solar panels here in the United States. Representative Ryer, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative. I've studied China long enough to know they say many things and many things don't happen. It's been an area of academic interest of mine for many years. And so my confidence in their statements is limited.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry I missed most of the bill presentation, but I just wanted to thank Representative Ryer for bringing this forward. I think this is a really good idea. And honestly, it's something that's long overdue in Minnesota and in the U.S. in general. When we look at other countries using up space that has no other purpose and putting solar panels on it to generate energy, that's a positive thing, and almost everywhere else in the world thinks of it as a positive thing. I also wanted to note that I'll soon have a bill for electronics recycling that I hope Representative Igo will be supporting, because I do think it's important that we use what materials we actually have here, and there's an estimated enough copper to make, 100,000 electric vehicles, just based on what we're not recycling here in Minnesota. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for procuring the materials that we need to make solar panels here in the U.S. We just need to think outside the box a little bit.
Thank you, Representative. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if the author could let us know, since your 4 or 5 testifiers said that this is the cheapest option, can you tell us what the per kilowatt cost is for both rooftop and standalone solar?
Maybe what we could do is bring up Mr. O'Grady. He might have some of the details about that. If not, that's okay too. We can always get the information and get back to the Representative. Representative Ryer, did you have a response?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep. O'Neill. Yes, if Mr. O'Grady doesn't have that, we'll be happy to get back to you.
Mr. O'Grady.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill, I think there's a lot of what-ifs in your question. It completely depends on project size, system size, what type of panels they're using, and there's a lot of questions, but we can work with you after this to get some broad estimates based on some of the companies that work in this space.
Representative O'Neill.
Madam Chair, so this is the only committee that this bill will be heard in. It's not going to state and local government. It's not going to commerce. This is the Energy Committee, and you told us repeatedly that this is the cheapest option. I want to know at least what the range is.
Mr. O'Grady.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill, we can get you a range based. We would look at this program and see what would be the largest system we would do, what would be the smallest system we would do. I can get a polling of our 140 members and try to get an idea. They all compete against each other. So there's a lot of questions there that I can't give you an immediate answer right now, but I can work after and get you some numbers.
Representative Ryer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, I echo the preference for that approach because I can see that you don't want general figures. There are national figures on things that we could get you, but if Mr. O'Grady can do the work to get you something that's very tailored to this proposal, I think that would be good for all of us.
Representative O'Neill.
Well, Madam Chair, it seems like we're not really ready. I mean, there's a lot of hyperbole of this is the cheapest, but when I ask real numbers, I get nothing. And when we had Xcel Energy here that day, I remember very clearly that they were talking about utility scale solar, which of course is much more efficient because it's utility scale and not small scale. And they have the option of siting it as perfectly as they possibly can to some of it tracks the sun. And because of all of the increased cost, inflation, labor, product, recycling, which we're not doing. Now you can say, oh, we're recycling solar panels, but really it's just the glass and the frame and the junction box and the wires, but the components inside are not being recycled. It's being either incinerated or landfilled. But anyway, so the day that Xcel Energy was here, the testifiers had said it was between 5 and 7 cents a kilowatt, and that's utility scale solar. So I can't imagine it being cheaper than utility scale solar. That seems impossible because that was when the PUC commissioner was here, if you remember correctly, and he said that with the current contracts that Xcel Energy is now receiving and entering into, it's 5 to 7 cents a kilowatt. And, you know, I mean, I might know, I wish Representative Mecklen was here. He might have the current numbers, but I happen to know the last time I was at Sherco, which I know you all despise, but in any case, it's 3.3 cents a kilowatt hour at Sherco, 3.3 cents. Utility scale solar is 5 to 7 cents, and nuclear is just a little bit above Sherco. So I have a really hard time believing the testimony, especially when you don't have real numbers for me, that this could possibly be the cheapest option. And maybe it's because it's 30% federal subsidies, and now the state of Minnesota is going to pour out a whole bunch, but maybe that's what it is. I'm not really sure. But I have a really hard time believing the testifiers saying that this is the cheapest option, especially when you're talking about end of life and who's going to bear that cost, who's going to maintain it, who's going to take care of panels when they break, who's going to take care of junction boxes when they break, who's going to take care of wires when they get cut or chewed by an animal, who's going to maintain it? Is the small little city that only has 2 or 3 employees going to somehow now have to maintain this solar panel on top of their roof or adjacent to their building? There's a lot of unanswered questions, and we don't even have a fiscal note. We're hearing a bill in this rush of this session, an unprecedented, historic rush through these bills. We don't even have a fiscal note. So those are just a few of my concerns. We probably will never hear this bill again. It'll get tucked into an omnibus bill or something, but there's a lot of really, really unanswered questions. Well, let me just ask a very, very simple one that maybe can be answered. What is the efficiency rate? So what is the percentage of time that a solar panel is producing nameplate capacity here in Minnesota, not in Texas, not in Arizona, not in Florida, right here in Minnesota?
So Representative O'Neill, I think the testifiers said that they will get you the information. I appreciate your digging for details that are really important to this project and to many others. And I think that there's been demonstrated willingness to find that information and get it back for you.
Madam Chair, this is the Energy Committee. This is the only place that this bill will be seen or heard. And we don't have any, we have hyperbole saying this is the cheapest, but it's clearly not. It's clearly not. We don't have any information. We have no data to back this up, and we're just supposed to take their word for it.
Well, I think
that's not how we do legislation here at the legislature. This is just not how we do this.
So I think you're kind of getting down into the weeds instead of kind of being above and looking at the project as a whole. And so when you look at putting solar on a state facility to save them money so that they can take tax dollars being brought in from their communities and allocate them differently, I think that this actually is a win-win. And so I appreciate that you have some concerns, and we're going to work to get you the information that will answer your questions. With that, final question from Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just, looking at the tailoring, I'd appreciate, when you get the information
Yes,
from Marion O'Neill's question, if you'd share it with the committee, I'd appreciate it. But two, just looking at other programs that are currently out there. So the way this is going to work, you're using general fund money for folks that are outside of the Excel Center, Excel ratepayers, and then you'll be using RDA funds. Is that correct? Okay, so will schools be able to use this fund, or government entities be able to use this fund to participate in a solar garden construction?
Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative. That has not been discussed as part of this bill. This bill has been discussed specifically to the local units of government for their use within their community.
Representative Swazinski.
Madam Chair, we've heard of like City of St. Cloud. We've had, I believe they testified that they had used the solar gardens, or I forget what city it was, but they use it as a portion, whether it's a school. We've seen where units of government have participated in a solar garden. And is it your belief, is it your will that they could use a portion, they could apply for a grant, and you said in your testimony that they don't have to build it on the physical building, but they could build it in an adjoining area. Is it your goal with this bill that they would able to use the funds in this account and apply for them to build their portion and pay for their portion of a solar garden if they reside in Xcel Energy? Or would you like to limit that so that they can't?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, my intent was that it would be connected to the locations that are currently not used for energy production. Traveling to other countries, you see widespread use of solar in places where it's relevant, where it gets the sun exposure that it needs. To me, this is another complementary piece that would open up more possibilities. So that is my intent, to have it be specific to the buildings or the adjacent areas.
And I will just say, if you look at the bill on line 2.17, it says 40 kilowatts or 120% of the average of the building. So it's not going to be generating enough for additional consumption. Any Representative Swazinski.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And just, I'm just thinking of this, Representative Igo kind of spoke to it a little bit, and kind of the sourcing of the solar panels, and because they're kind of going on in near critical areas, is it your thoughts, because of kind of the rough nature of how some of the minerals are gathered globally, from the documented use of slave labor, that maybe we would ban, so that we don't have I think the idea of child slaves working in another part of the world, and then them being built by our kids, it's kind of really a juxtaposition, I think, if we'd be willing to protect, those projects that are going to go on our schools, which is where our most precious kids are, that we won't utilize products that are used with slave labor near our kids. Would you be potentially open for that if we would bring an amendment when this bill comes, possibly in an omnibus bill or something like that?
Representative Ryer.
Madam Chair, Representative, the issue of sourcing is a global issue. It's a national issue. It's being addressed at a national level, and I think that that's where it belongs. Of course, all of us are appalled by the things that happen, but there are many injustices in the world, including here in our own country. And so to me, I look at different levels of it. We must also protect our climate. Our children, my granddaughter, are at risk because of the climate crisis. And all of those things need to be taken into account. And I sincerely hope and trust that we will move to issues to resolve the sourcing problems that you're raising. But to me, this is not the place to in one specific bill. In the scheme of things, it's real money, but in the scheme of things, it is not a comprehensive statement of state policy. And to me, that would just not be appropriate. And just to clarify, this is not for schools. This is the public buildings, but yeah.
Any closing statements as we as we lay over your bill? Any closing statements from the author?
Thank you. So there is homework to do, and there are conversations to have, and I welcome that. I appreciate the challenge of taking all the perspectives on a project like this, because we are innovating. We are moving forward into a new era in the world where we have to be adaptive, and we have to find solutions to our problems. I am excited about the possibilities here because I know, talking to city leaders and other organizations who represent city leaders, that this is something that communities want, and we are giving them an option that they don't currently have. And to me, that's the epitome of local control. It's the epitome of investing in our communities, and I look forward to moving forward.
Great. With that, the bill is laid over. Thank you, Representative Ryer.